recording this talk so that I can share it with people afterwards. If you don't wish to be on video, that's absolutely fine. Just turn your video and audio off and you can just listen in and potter about doing whatever you're doing. So to those of you who are doing that already, welcome. And those of you that are happy to leave your video on, that's absolutely fine. While I'm doing the talk, I've got a slideshow which I'll be sharing, so I will mute you all anyway, so you can mutter to yourselves and I won't be able to hear you, that's fine. Okay. So just a few more folk coming in. Nice to see some familiar faces and some new ones as well.
Hi, Tansy.
Hello. Hello. Okay.
Tansy, hello from Cherry. I'm eating my tea, so that's why I'm keeping my video off, because I'm just in from work.
Okay, Cherry, that's
nice
quite reasonable. Yes, I will mute you when everyone think everybody's arrived. I think I've got 17 people coming along, so I'm just going to check how many we've got. So just a couple more to come in and then we'll get started. So if anybody's just joining me, it's just wanted to let you know that I'm recording this session so that I can share it afterwards. So it will consist of me talking for perhaps about half an hour. It's very hard to judge really once I get going, but I've got lots of pictures, so there's things to look at. It's not just me droning on. And then we'll have opportunity for some questions and things afterwards. So if anybody's unfamiliar with Zoom, just to let you know that there's a chat facility. So at the bottom of your Zoom panel, there's a little kind of message box that says chat. So if you want to ask questions, the easiest way to do that is to put them in the chat. And then when I've got a chance to answer questions, I can just scroll through them all and hopefully answer the questions that you have. Okay, so it's 5 past. I think we'll get started, and there might be a couple more people coming in, but that's okay. We'll catch them up. So, welcome. This is the first time I've done an artist talk by myself. It's a bit strange. I'm used to doing them with a crowd of people and being able to see people's faces and body language and things. So, this is a new experience for me, but I'm probably like many of you that we've had to very rapidly learn how to use this kind of technology, so it's not completely unfamiliar to me. So a little bit of an introduction then. I'm joining you from my studio, which is at the end of my garden, which I was extremely glad of when it came to lockdown, because I had many friends who had studios in Edinburgh and Glasgow and places where they couldn't get to them. So I was able to spend quite a lot of time in the studio, which is fantastic. And I'm going to be talking to you about, really about what I do, just generally what I do and why I do it, but particularly relating to the exhibition that's on at the moment, an online exhibition called Out of the Wood, which is being hosted by Edinburgh Palette, which is at St Margaret's House, where I used to have my studio in Edinburgh. So it's been a fantastic opportunity to have them host the exhibition, and it's a joint exhibition with an artist called Margaret Pitt, who is a printmaker. And originally the exhibition was scheduled to be running at Drum Castle in Aberdeen, just outside Aberdeen, but with COVID that meant that was cancelled, so the online exhibition is where we took it. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. Just remembered. I'm good. So I'm just about to mute you all, just to let you know that, so you can talk to yourselves now, and then I will continue, and then I will share my screen. Okay. So, so welcome to my studio. This was taken on a sunny day, not like it was yesterday, which is utterly miserable. So this is my studio at the end of the garden. I've been in this studio for nearly 3 years now. Previously had a studio in Edinburgh, in St Margaret's House, as I said. So this was certainly a good move. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to be talking about why do I draw trees? Well, that's something that I'm often asked. Why did I pick that particular subject? I'm going to talk a little bit about who my heroes are creatively, so who are the artists and thinkers who have influenced me in my work. I'm going to talk a little bit about my creative process and my materials. I'm going to talk about the themes in my work, so the things that I'm perhaps thinking about, or the things that I'm trying to get across when I'm working. And then there'll be opportunity for some questions. So as I say, you can put the questions in the chat section, and then I'll be able to see those once I've finished doing the talk. Okay, so why trees? Well, I'm really quite glad that this is a blurred photograph, because if you could see me close up in the 1970s in that outfit, it would not be a pretty sight. But this is my sister and myself standing inside the Major Oak, which is probably one of Britain's most famous trees. It's the biggest tree in Sherwood Forest in Nottinghamshire. Possibly the oldest, but big trees don't always equal old trees. Some quite small trees can be very, very old. But my grandparents lived in Nottinghamshire and used to take us to Sherwood Forest regularly. And at the time, you were allowed to actually go inside the Major Oak. So it was hollow, you could get inside it. There was something incredibly magical about that. And it made a massive impression on me. The whole forest is incredible. There's a very large number of very ancient oaks there. You know, we'd have the Robin Hood story and things that would, as a child, would give it a kind of extra life. But I think now I look back on it, I think that was probably quite a formative experience, just being around these ancient oak trees. I went to visit it a few years ago, maybe kind of 3-4 years ago, and that's what it looks like now. It's propped up. You can't go anywhere near it, and that's very good for the tree. It's a shame for us who might want to interact with it, but it's protected from any kind of compaction around the roots and things. So it's an incredibly impressive structure, and incredibly old as well. Another influence is my dad. So it's my dad, Tony Lee. He was a wood turner. He was a joiner. He could make pretty much anything out of wood. He was self-taught, but really had an affinity with wood and absolutely loved his workshop and just spent time in his workshop. So I've got a photograph of him in my studio just to remind me that I'm kind of following in his footsteps there. So he showed me how to make things with wood. I actually did my degree in three-dimensional design, making things out of wood, metal, ceramics, glass. So I learned to make things out of wood. I learned about wood as a material before I even thought about using trees as a subject for fine art. I got my studio in St Margaret's House in 2008. At the time I was doing a lot of community arts work, which was great, but I wanted a little bit of a change, and I really felt like I wanted to get back to drawing. And this tree was really the kind of turning point for me in terms of the work that I do now. This was a tree which I used to drive past most days to go to work. And one day I went past it and it had been cut. So it had been lopped, as you can see it in the photograph. The top had been cut off it. I don't know why. I assume because it wasn't safe. It's on the Hopetoun estate, so it's not particularly close to the road, but I assume that it was deemed to be unsafe, and that's why it was cut. But it was the way that it was cut that was so dramatic. It literally stopped me in my tracks, and I had to stop at the lay-by and go and have a look at it, and then kept going back, kept photographing it, drawing it. what it did was it made me realize that, because at the time I was very interested in drawing trees, but I was really struggling with the complexity of them and how much stuff, how much information there is to try and capture in a drawing. And what this made me realize was that the chainsaw had basically taken away all the bits I wasn't interested in. It made me realize that I don't have to do all the teeny tiny branches, and I don't have to do leaves, and those are not the things that actually inspire me. It's the sculptural shapes, it's the forms of the tree. So this was really the big kind of leap forward in terms of my work about trees. And this was one of the very early drawings that I did, which I called Hoped and Half Tree, because there was only half of it left. And in charcoal. So this was a kind of conjunction between the subject matter really kind of coming to the fore, and the fact that I'd restricted myself to just using charcoal. So I finally kind of found my groove really with that. So that's where that started. So a little bit about who my heroes and inspiration, who are those people? These are a couple of photographs from my studio wall. So I've got a corner in the studio that's just kind of in my peripheral vision when I'm at my drawing board, that's got lots of images that sort of seep into the work. So I'm not necessarily making reference to any of these in particular, but I'm kind of soaking these things up. These are things that when I see them, there's something that fits with the way that I look at the world, and I put them up on the wall. So first of all of those would be Henry Moir. When I was at school, as you can imagine, art was pretty much the only thing I was interested in. And I had a really good art teacher who was very interested in sculpture himself. And he was delighted when I got interested in sculpture too. And Henry Moir was an artist who I studied when I was at school. And he was still alive then, and I actually got the chance to go to his studio. Not with him in it, obviously, but go on a studio tour. He was quite elderly by then. Really what always drew me to Henry Moir's work was the fact that it's all based on natural forms, so I always found that very appealing. But his sense of motion and dynamism within a very kind of solid form was something that I thought was fantastic. And that's a quote from a book that he put together about pieces in the British Museum. So it's this idea that a sculpture can be completely static, but give the impression of having a lot of movement about it. And he was very much inspired by Greek sculpture, and that's certainly something that I've got lots of photographs of around the studio. This one in the Louvre in Paris it kind of sums it up, but there are many like this where they look incredibly solid. Obviously they're carved out of stone, but they also look very fluid, as if they might just move at any moment. That I think is wonderful, and something that I'm trying to capture in my drawings as well. These are two views of one of the Parthenon figures that are in the British Museum. Again, that Greek kind of classical style, where you've got the contrast between the smoothness, where the fabric as it is draped over the figure, and then the folds and the flowing move of the fabric. I think those are fantastic. And the fact that they don't have heads and hands is sort of, it's a bit of a cliche really about classical sculpture, but I prefer them like that. If they had heads and hands, I would find those bits a bit distracting. If I'm doing life drawing, I do the heads and hands, but that's not really the bit that I'm interested in. I'm interested in the torso, I'm interested in the large muscles and the kind of gestures of the figures. And this is one of my favourite sculptures. This is a Rodin sculpture. I had a visit to Paris a couple of years ago and went to the Rodin's house museum, which was absolutely brilliant. If you love sculpture, total heaven. And this is my favourite one of his. And again, it's got that sense of dynamism. It's got a huge amount of movement in it. So that's something that I know I'm always trying to do when I'm drawing trees, is that although you're looking at a static object, it's a living thing, and it has been moving. It's moving all the time. It's just moving very, very slowly. So that's really what I'm trying to capture, is a sense of movement and the way I represent trees. painters, I realised when I put the talk together, I didn't have many painters in here because I'm not really a painter. As you can see, sculpture really is where the bulk of my inspiration comes from. But if you're to make me pick a favourite painter, it would absolutely be Rembrandt. I absolutely blown away by Rembrandts whenever I see them. If you get the chance to see them in person, please go and see them in person. It's like meeting somebody. They're so powerful. His mastery of light and just general paint technique is absolutely incredible. But there's something about the humanity that comes through from the paintings that I think is quite unique, and so quite rightly seen as one of the masters. Something very different. Alongside all those more recent inspirations, I've always been fascinated by prehistoric art. When I discovered that there was a cave in France with drawings that were absolutely stunning drawings that were over 30,000 years old, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that people could do that 30,000 years ago. Blew my mind. So the Chauvet Cave is one of the most incredible things that I think humanity's ever left behind. Who knows how many there are that are undiscovered yet, but this is one that I would love to go and visit. There's a reconstruction of it. You can't visit the original one because that would damage it, but there's a reconstruction, certainly on my wish list of places to go. And again, it's this sense of energy. You can tell that the people that drew these animals looked at them very, very hard. They knew these animals. They knew how they moved, and they're not trying to make a picture here. They're trying to capture something of the essence of the animal. These are two artists called Ollie and Susie, and they work together. They're very unique. I don't know of anybody else who works this way. Basically, they paint together. So the picture that you can see them holding has been made by the two of them. So they work kind of hand over hand on the same image. They don't really talk about what they're going to do. They just work instinctively together. And what they do is focus on wildlife art. So particularly going to places where wildlife is under threat, or where the animals themselves are endangered, and they bring back their kind of their impressions of these animals, but they get very, very close to these animals. So they actually involve the animals themselves in the drawing. So they had a series where they were actually drawing and painting underwater with sharks. So there's a Storyville BBC Storyville documentary about them, which is where I first came across them, and it was absolutely amazing. But really, what I love about their work is it's got that same sense of life about it that the cave paintings do, that the prehistoric cave drawings do. That it's in the moment. They're capturing the moment where they interact with that animal. There's no attempt here to make a nice picture necessarily. That's not what it's about. It's about an encounter between the artists and the animals. Slightly different kind of side of the influences. This is things that are particularly to do with trees. Roger Deakin was an English environmentalist, campaigner, broadcaster, writer. He wrote this book which has had a big influence on me. So the book's called Wildwood, and it's got lots of different chapters that relate to different kinds of trees and different environments and different places around the world. And the way that he saw trees and wrote about them really changed my thinking. So I think that's certainly one I would say was kind of underpinning the way that I see trees and woodland now. And the other one is this one, Beachcombings by Richard Mabey, who is a naturalist, writer, broadcaster, who's written many books. The Food for Free foraging book is his most well-known one. But this one is about trees and woodland. And again, it has lots of different viewpoints, looking at how we relate to trees in our culture, how trees have been depicted in art, how trees are kind of signifiers of class and status. I learned about the agricultural revolution and enclosures and all these sorts of things from this book, so I highly recommend this one. But it's got something, it kind of chimed with me in that I have an emotional response to particular trees, and he clearly has the same, so that's something that it's definitely one of my favourite books. It's got little scribbles all over it, so you can just know it's a good one. Okay, and then this one, a bit more local. This one is in just outside Sheffield, this tree. So I'm originally from Derbyshire, and I've got family in Sheffield as well. Professor Ian Rotherham, who teaches at Sheffield Hallam University, leads a research group and has hosted many events, conferences, workshops and projects that are looking at what he calls eco-cultural landscapes. So it's looking at how humans interact with the landscape to create the forms that it's in now. So a lot of people would think that, for instance, the moorland in the Peak District, they might think that that's a natural habitat, but there's nothing natural about it really. It's very much engineered by people for grouse shooting, particularly at the moment. But this tree is an example of a previous kind of land use. So it's an oak tree where the branches have been bent outwards and downwards to promote leaf growth, but also acorn growth, because this tree was used for pannage, which is feeding pigs. So before the era of enclosures, where people could take their animals onto the commons to feed them at certain times of the year, then acorns would be a very valuable source of food for your pigs. So this is not a natural form for a tree. So really what Ian and his colleagues have enabled me to do is to read the shapes of a tree, to kind of read the story of it. So, so I know now that that tree didn't just grow like that by accident, that there was human intervention there. And that's one of the themes that goes through my work. And this is at one of their events at Sheffield Hallam University. Myself and Anne Gilchrist, who's also pictured there, did a wee project on Dalkeith Country Park and the old oaks there, and took some information there to share with the conference. So I've been going most years. Obviously, they haven't been doing any events this year, but I'll certainly be going back once they start doing that. Great place to meet lots of tree people. Everybody's wearing walking boots. It's brilliant. So, my materials. So I'm particularly known for working with charcoal. So why charcoal? Well, all those reasons. It's messy, it's mobile, you can move it around, you can smoosh it around with your hands, you can continually change it. It's just black, so there's no complicated colour stuff. You don't need to mix any colours or anything. It's very tactile. It's also very ancient, as the images from the Chauvet cave indicate. There's many of them that are made with charcoal. And it's also made of wood. So there's many reasons why I like charcoal, but it's a fabulous medium. I find, so that's an example of how subtle you can be with it. So you can be dramatic with it. You can go very black, but you can also go very pale. You can make very fine marks. You can make very bold marks. There's just a huge amount you can do with it. So charcoals will always be a favourite material for me. Little selection of the things that I use. So I forgot to mention, actually, charcoal's very cheap. So if you're starting out doing arty things, then charcoal's definitely the way to start. I use charcoal sticks, which you'd be used to seeing in an art shop, but I also use charcoal powder. So that's very, very finely ground charcoal. So my black hand there is because I've rubbed it on the plate with the charcoal powder. So I'm painting with my fingers, basically, painting with my hands with the charcoal. I also use a selection of rubbers and other tools. So that's really my kind of main material is the charcoal and the paper. So many of the charcoal drawings that are in the exhibition and on my website would start like this. They would start with a white sheet of paper. I experimented quite a lot with different papers, different makes, different textures and weights, and found one that I really, really like. So I've kind of stuck with that one. So it's got a bit of a tooth to it. It's got enough texture on the surface to enable the charcoal to stick, but it's not too bumpy so that I can get some detail as well. So that's, you can see my kind of finger marks on there where the charcoal powder has been, and then you can smooth it out to give you a kind of toned paper and that kind of effect. And I put that quote in because that's one that I have on my studio wall as well, just to keep reminding me that the limitation of means determines style. So basically that's a little reminder to give yourself quite tight parameters, and that will enable you to be more creative within those. Because actually what often is the artist problem is there's just too much choice. There's too many ideas, too much choice, too many different materials. You're just overwhelmed with it. You don't know where to start. And what worked for me was to really focus in. So if I'm making a charcoal drawing, I really have only two things. I have dust and paper, just those two things. And it's a combination of how much dust in one spot, where I take it away, how much paper do I let shine through. Those are the parameters. And within that, you can then experiment quite a lot. I use these kind of weird homemade tools, chamois leather. I don't know, tenner from Halfords, you can get a large piece. You don't have to go to the art shop for this. And this is nice for making random marks. What the chamois leather does is it lifts some of the charcoal dust away from the paper. So it's like an eraser, but it gives you different sorts of marks. I actually got the idea for these sorts of tools from a journey on the motorway, where I was driving behind a big truck that had, the kind of webbing type straps that they tie the awnings down on the truck, and it was very dirty. But the wind, as the truck was driving along, had made the webbing flap around, and it had basically drawn in the dirt. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I might try that. So that's how I came up with those. This is the kind of close-up of the chamois leather. And this is a little close-up of me making some of the tools. So I've just experimented over the years with cutting it into different shapes, different sorts of textures, different lines for a kind of a range of marks that you can make with it. And I use brushes as well. So I just do the kind of basic thing, drawing with a charcoal stick, but then sometimes I'll tape the charcoal stick to an actual stick, which makes my arm about 6 foot long, which makes drawing a different experience. That's quite good fun as well. So for big drawings, that's particularly good. So that's all about my charcoal. Well, what happened when we went into lockdown and I was stuck at home was that I decided it was time to try something different. So I've had some oil paints in the studio and played about with them, and had some oil pastels and played about with them before, but not really kind of pursued it. Gave up a little bit too fast, perhaps. So what I decided to do was just to go for it, really, and just to start trying to work in colour from some of my drawings and photographs that I had. So the phoenix trees that some of you will have seen in the exhibition are all done with oil paints and oil pastel and some charcoal as well. So I finally taken the leap into working with colour, and I've absolutely loved it. I've also been experimenting with just oil paint and different textures and things. So that's something else that this is an experiment, by the way. This isn't in the exhibition. This is just a little kind of trying out. So over the last 3 months, there's been a lot of experimentation. I've tried lots of different things, and oil paint certainly will be something that I'll be looking at in the future using. So a wee bit about my processes. So this might be something that if you've been to other artist talks or read about these things, you hear about, well, people's creative process. It's a very individual thing. The creative process is a very individual thing. It depends on your subject. It depends on whether you like to be by yourself or with other people. It's just something that evolves over time. So this is how my process has evolved over time. And it always starts with meeting some trees. So it's always going to be beginning with getting outside, spending some time in a woodland. And always will be about drawing those trees. The book called The Zen of Seeing is a fantastic book about drawing if anybody's interested in kind of building up their collection of drawing books. It's a 70s book, I think. Yes, I can't remember exactly when it was published. It's been around, it feels like it's been around forever, but still very useful today. But it's really, that quote there is really just about saying how differently you experience something when you've drawn it. So just looking at it or just pointing your phone at it and taking a photograph is nothing like the same as sitting down to draw it and really examining it. In the same way that the artists Ollie and Susie have an encounter with the animal that they're drawing. Sometimes it's quite a dangerous one in their case. The biggest danger that I face might be a branch falling on my head, but I'm really trying to capture the same thing. I'm trying to capture the sense of life of the tree that I'm looking at. I'll do a lot of research looking at maps. One of the great tree men, Oliver Rackham, did a lot of research work and wrote some fantastic books about woodlands and history. And there's lots of ways in his books that teach you to look at the shape of woodlands as a hint of whether they might be very old or whether they might be quite new. So the shapes that the woodlands actually make on the map can be an indicator of, well, there might be some quite old trees there. I use National Library of Scotland historical maps are fantastic. You can overlay those, so you can look through time. You can also overlay it with a satellite image as well. So you can see how the landscape has changed over time. You can see the areas that have been built up, and you can see the areas where the woodland has always been woodland. That's another thing that I would be looking out for. The Ancient Tree Inventory from the Woodland Trust is a fantastic resource that's been going for quite a long time. The volunteers will record and log ancient trees. It covers the whole country. I just put the bit on Scotland there. So that's a searchable map that is quite a good source of looking for where there might be clusters of old trees. And then once I've found a location that I think is going to be quite fruitful, then I would have a period of research. So this is Calderwood in West Lothian, which I researched when I had a residency at Howden Park Centre in Livingston for 6 months. So I spent a year really continually visiting the woodland, exploring all the little paths, going down the little deer tracks and finding my way around, looking at the maps, finding out about the history, and then recording all the different trees that I thought were notable. Which brings me to Drum Castle. So Drum Castle, which is just to the west of Aberdeen, is a National Trust property. And Drum Castle has Drum Oak is the name of the village, and there's an ancient hunting forest, the remnants of an ancient hunting forest, beside the castle. It's part of the castle grounds. So the ranger there, Tony Watt, she got in touch with me to see if I might be interested in perhaps talking about an exhibition there, but also if I was interested in the woodland. So she very kindly took me on a walk around the woodland, told me all about the history of it. It is a beautiful place. It's a really lovely place. There are not very large ancient oaks. So there's nothing on the scale of the major oak, for instance, like in Sherwood Forest. But there are some really quite old trees. The fact that it's that much further north is a factor, really, so that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see very large trees, but there are certainly some quite old ones. And there are many that show lots of evidence of animals intervention, human intervention, coppicing, all sorts of different processes. So I spent a bit of last year, some of this year, on a few research visits in Drum Oak, in the woodland, drawing some of these old trees. So this is an old oak that's got an incredibly bulbous base. There's quite a few of those in Dalkeith Country Park as well, with that kind of form. And I kind of think of it as if I'm foraging for images. That's really my kind of mental attitude when I'm going out in the woods. So I'm hunting for things that I think are going to be interesting and things that I want to draw. I also have started using this year, and there's an app called What 3 Words. So some of you might be familiar with it. If you're not, I think it's incredibly useful. It's designed for emergency services to be able to pinpoint people. So every square metre has three unique words, a combination of 3 unique words. So if you get lost in the woods, or if you break your ankle or something and you need to phone somebody for help, you phone the emergency services and you tell them those 3 words, and then they can find you exactly. I think it's a fantastic invention. So I've started using it to plot where the particular trees are, because sometimes they're quite easy to find. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to find your way back to places. But also I want to be able to share that with people who are looking at the work as well. So for instance, somebody who bought the drawing that I made of that particular cherry tree might want to go and visit the tree, so I can tell them exactly where it is. That's another view of that same tree. So this is in Drum Oak Woods. And we excerpt from a John Clare poem, who's an English poet, which I really like, because it's basically like these amazing things are just waiting for you to find them. Like, all I've got to do is find them. And then when I found them, I draw them. And this is a poem from a good friend, Steve Smart, a friend and collaborator. He writes amazing poetry, and he wrote this one after a walk that we did when I was doing some drawing. So he's really, I think he's really described the experience of drawing. I'll stop talking for a minute just to let you read that. So I always think of that, the first line there now, when I'm out drawing, the first step is to stop. So the process of drawing, you know, I'm walking around, I'm having a look, and then I find something that really has an impact on me, and I stop and then start to draw. Sometimes my drawing efforts are sabotaged. This was a day in Dalkeith Country Park when I'd set out to draw this one tree. So I had a plan. I wanted to draw 12 views of this tree, a kind of 360-degree thing for a piece for an exhibition that I had coming up. But the nosy cattle had other ideas, and I wasn't going to argue with them. So I had to get out of the field twice, and that's my tarp that I was using to sit on and draw on, that they were slavering all over. So that was pretty much unusable after that, but these are the hazards. I tend to draw in the winter and in the early spring. That means that I can see the forms of the trees, so they're not generally obscured by leaves, although in this photograph they are. It means that I avoid the midges, I avoid the bracken and the nettles. So all of these things are good. It's a bit cold, but I can cope with that. So winter, springtime is my main kind of drawing season. So this is just an example of the kind of 360-degree drawing that I was trying to make, and that's the one that ended up in the exhibition. So I was kind of drawing it from all different angles. So I start off with lots of sketches, sketchbook drawings, lots and lots of photographs, and a kind of saturated visual memory, if you like, of the trees that I've been looking at. I use Photoshop and an app on the iPad called Procreate, which is fantastic for drawing and using photographs. So I'll kind of sift through all of those images and find some that have got bits that I want to use. I do lots of kind of thumbnail sketches and just kind of experimenting with different compositions to try and find out what will work and what won't work. And then set off with a big piece of white paper and make these marks. So this is it's not a time lapse. I've got another little time lapse that I can show you, but this is just to give you an idea of the kind of progression of the work. So there's a lot of adding charcoal, taking it away, adding a bit more, taking a bit more away, general refinement, and that's the finished item. And then that's it on somebody's wall, which is fantastic. It's in his final home. So that's how a particular tree like that's one of my favourites that's up at Bee Craigs actually, in West Lothian. That's how that ends up being a figure like that. So I just choose the bits that I'm interested in, basically. I'm not trying to draw a portrait of a tree necessarily. These are the bits that I'm interested in. That's the same tree from a different angle. And that's a drawing from that one. That's one of the ones from Calderwood. And I've drawn that tree from lots of different angles as well and different lights. Fantastic one. So find a little bit about the themes that I would use. This is behind me on my studio wall. I've got a kind of mind map thing that helps me organise my thoughts. And it's got some of those heroes and some of that inspiration up there, but also some ideas for the future, the kind of pathways through, things that link, so very visual. And really the themes that are going through the work is the stories that the trees have to tell are actually written in the forms of the trees. So they're a kind of solidified time is really how I like to describe it. So a tree like that one has a story to tell. The hollowness is an integral part of that tree. It's not necessarily a problem. That tree's still thriving, actually. It just has quite an unusual form. This is one that, when I photographed it, was very, very close to its complete collapse, and made a very striking drawing as well. I've made lots of drawings of that one too. This is the word that you're going to go away with that you perhaps didn't know. Some of you might know this one, but pareidolia, the tendency to perceive a specific meaningful image in random patterns. So often what people say to me is that they can see things in the drawings. So they can see that it's a tree or a bit of a tree, but they can also see animals or faces or hands or all sorts of different things. So pareidolia is what your brain wants to do to make sense of randomness. And old trees have a lot of randomness going on. So that's something that I like to play on. So there'll be areas of the drawings that I would deliberately make quite ambiguous to kind of get the viewer to think about it themselves, to kind of respond in their own way. And that brings me on to the phoenix tree. So as I said earlier, with the oil paint and the colour was something that I've started doing just during the lockdown, but I had collected quite a large archive of photographs and drawings of phoenix trees. This is one just outside Sheffield. And a phoenix tree is one which has collapsed, blown over, suffered some sort of catastrophe, but it continues to grow. This is the best example that I could find, really, just to show you what happens. And I'm sure you will have seen these for anybody that goes out in the woods and in the landscape. So this is a beech tree that has been absolutely knocked over sideways. You can see the root plate there on the right, but the tree continues to grow and survive quite happily. The branches adjust to grow up towards the light, and the side shoots now become vertical branches. And that's one of the drawings that I made of it from different viewpoints. So they're not like normal trees that you would expect to see, but they are trees nonetheless. This is a birch tree in Drum Castle Forest. This is one which is almost unrecognisable, actually. It's quite difficult to tell what it is, but the roots have extended so far. That's the root plate, sort of looking at it end on. You can see it lying down at the side. So it's just completely adjusted to growing from horizontal. So the roots have stretched right out to anchor it to the ground. And in that area of the woodland, there were a lot of trees that were all blown in the same orientation, as if there'd been quite a big storm coming from the east, knocked them all over, and many of them were growing again from a horizontal position. And that's a drawing of that one. It was very hard to make sense of it, to be honest. I had to leave an awful lot out. I'd certainly like to go back there and do a lot more drawings. So during the lockdown period, I just got a bit carried away with the colour, really, and ended up making quite a lot of them. And I really enjoyed them. I think it gives a different viewpoint, really. The charcoal, I will always keep doing the charcoal, but the colour, I have really enjoyed doing that. So I'm going to stop my share and unmute you all. Okay. So welcome back. Okay. So I've talked for quite a long time there. I'm going to have a wee look through your questions. If anybody has any other questions that they would like to ask, pop them in the chat. Having a look. Rembrandt, thank you, Val. That's good. Okay. Would anybody like to ask any questions? I have unmuted you all, but some of you have muted yourselves if you want to. Marilyn, what would you like to ask? Oh, sorry, Marilyn, I can't hear you. You might need to, no. I can't hear you, Marilyn.
Oh, there we are. Is that? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Thanks for that. That was really enjoyable.
Great.
A question and an observation. Just a question. What counts as ancient when you talk about ancient woodlands and ancient trees?
Yes, that's a good question. It does depend on the tree.
Mm-hmm.
So a beech tree would be ancient at 300 years.
Okay.
250, 300 years. A birch tree would be ancient at maybe 150. A rowan maybe the same. An oak would be ancient at 600 to 800. So it depends very much on the lifespan of the tree. Mm-hmm. It also depends on where it's growing. So trees that grow in very kind of harsh upland kind of habitats would grow much slower. So they might not look very big, but they would actually be quite old. If you want to find out more about it, I recommend that you go on the Ancient Tree Hunt, the Ancient Tree Forum website. I will put that, if I just write that there. So I'm going to put it in the chat.
Lovely.
Everyone. I can't put the link in, but I'll just put, you Google Ancient Tree Forum. And they have quite a lot of information about how to recognise them. So they have several categories, and ancient trees would be the oldest, but also have the richest habitats in terms of all the other creatures that live on them. Veteran trees would be kind of category before that, so they have some of the same sort of fungal growth and holes and things like that in them. Notable trees would perhaps not very old, but might be particularly special because of where they are, or the kind of local interest, that sort of thing. So the Ancient Tree Forum have quite a lot of information about that. So I mean, it's a good question, because sometimes people just assume all old trees are ancient, but the way that they use the terms for the ecology are quite specific.
Yes, I had no idea. I had no idea. Just the observation that you were saying people read into your drawings whatever. Yes. They're in their own head, and I was just thinking some of them look quite anatomical.
Yes.
And surfaces and textures, sometimes it looks like musculature.
Yes.
Do that properly. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, just to make that observation.
Definitely. Well, you might have noticed that in the pictures that are on the studio wall and the kind of influences and things, there's a lot of figurative art in there. There's a lot of bits of bodies, shall we say. Yes. Yeah. Beech trees especially look like.
Yeah, you can see the relationship and why the words are interchangeable.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Marilyn. Does anybody else want to ask a question? No? Would you like me to show you a little time lapse of a charcoal drawing? I'm not going to do a demo now, but so if I get a nod, yes, most people would like me to do that.
Yeah.
So maybe do that, and then I'm aiming to finish around about 8 o'clock.
Yes, that would be good.
Probably not had your tea, but I will share that for you just now. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep. Yep. Good. Okay, so this is one of the pieces in the exhibition, and this just gives you an idea about the process. So you can see what I mean about painting with my hands. That's one of those funny little homemade tools that you can see coming in there. So I use erasers, I use putty rubbers are really the best thing to work with charcoal. A bit like blue tack, they're kind of sticky. And the chamois leather that also pulls it off. But sometimes just your finger can lift off a little bit of the charcoal. So once it gets to that stage, there's quite a lot of going backwards and forwards, moving things around. So as I said at the beginning, that's one of the things that I like about the charcoal, is that you can continually change it. So right up till the last minute. If I decide I don't like that, I can just scrub it and start again. So I did edit out the bits where I sit and look at it, because there's quite a lot of that. I'm not necessarily working all the time. You do have to sit back and have a look to see which bits to fix. Somebody once described the process of making a drawing like herding sheep to me, which I thought was really good. So herding sheep in that you're always trying to round up the ones at the back, the stragglers, the ones that are not doing as they're told, the ones that are not, they haven't read the script. So with the drawing, instead of concentrating on the bits that are working well, you're always concentrating on the bits that are not working well. You're looking to fix those to keep the whole thing moving along. It's quite difficult to know when to stop. That's something else that I'm quite often asked. Generally, I should have stopped about 15 minutes before I actually stop. But you really notice as soon as you start getting really fiddly with it, it's definitely time to stop. That really comes with practice, I think, knowing that, having the confidence to say I'm just going to leave it. And once I've finished it, once I think I've finished it, I very rarely go back and do anything to it, because that would usually only make it worse.
Yeah.
Yes, I've learnt my lesson there. Okay.
Amazing.
So if only it was that easy. That took 3.5 minutes. That drawing. maybe a day, maybe 2 days. It depends.
Tansy, may I ask a question?
Yes.
This is Angela from Seattle, Washington.
Hello, Angela. Hello. I can't see you because of the number of people on my screen. So apologies if I'm not looking at you. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for this time. The question is, given how malleable the material is that you work with, the charcoal, do you do anything at the end to fix the material to the paper?
I do, yes. It's a very good question. I do. I use fixative. So I use professional fixative charcoal, and they are always framed behind glass, because even with fixative, they are quite fragile. So it is a fragile medium in the sense that you can smudge it. So it always needs to be framed behind glass. So, and I have a very reliable, trusted framer who I know will look after it as well.
Perfect. So, thank you.
The kind of classic student thing is that you have a kind of hairspray with you all the time, because hairspray is quite an effective fixative for drawings that you're not selling. You know, if you kind of just working yourself, then it's an awful lot cheaper than the fixative. But
and it keeps your work from getting frizzy.
It does, and it makes it smell like a hairdresser's. Yes, it does. Thank you for your question. Would anybody else like to ask anything just now?
Hi there, Tansy. I've typed a message in the chat.
Yes. Oh yeah, I see you. How do you manage to lift the charcoal to get the bright highlights? Yes.
Yeah, I use this. I've been doing some portraits with a similar technique, and struggle to get real bright highlights back.
What kind of paper are you using?
I've been experimenting, so it's quite smooth.
Yeah.
It's just a heavyweight sketchbook, so it's really quite smooth. It's not got much to it.
Yes. Well, I use a putty rubber, and the chamois leather is quite soft, and that actually leaves some behind. The putty rubber is really the thing that will give you the white. Yeah. Generally, if I know that there's an area that I want to preserve white, I will leave that fairly white. So it's quite difficult to get marks made by the willow charcoal sticks. It's quite difficult to completely erase those, but the charcoal powder is a bit more forgiving. You can lift it out a little bit better. Compressed charcoal I really don't like at all. That you can't really remove that at all. It's got a kind of waxy texture to it, which I don't like very much. But I would just say experiment a bit with your paper as well.
Yeah.
And go light. Start light and work towards the dark.
Easy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I'd really just like to thank everybody for coming along. This has been a great first experience for a kind of online artist talk. So thank you very much for all your participation. Oh, I haven't see it. Just see. Oh no, sorry, Tamsin, you've got to ask a question. Once you've done all your research and sketches, you draw the final work from your head. Tamsin, I do a combination, so I will have sketches, photographs, photographs that have been manipulated in Photoshop, and what's in my head. So it's a combination of all of those things. So I've got the reference material with the photos and things alongside. Some of my little kind of oil experiments and things, I've just been working from what's in my head. I think you can go quite a long way with that, but you don't quite get the sense of complexity that you would if you got the reference material. So it's sort of a mixture of all of them.
Thank you. Yes, I understood that you'd been through all those complicated processes, but I wondered whether maybe once you actually started with your final bit of paper, whether you then put those away and just went with.
No, it's all in there for me. No, it's all, they're all stuck around the drawing board and things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I just finally want to say thanks to all of you. Thanks a lot to Tony. I see Tony's face there. Hi, Tony. So Tony's the ranger who introduced me to Drum Castle and the woodland there in the first place. So it's a fantastic place. I can't wait to get back there when it's when the leaves are fallen and I'm allowed to travel, obviously, if I'm still allowed to travel there. And thanks very much to Edinburgh Palette as well and the team there for hosting the online exhibition. So if you've seen my Facebook page or my other social media, you'll see all the links there. If you've not seen the exhibition, go and have a look at it. And it finishes on Friday, but it just goes into their kind of past exhibitions archive, so it will still be viewable. So yeah, go in and have a look at it. And if anybody's interested in looking at the pieces in person, coming for a studio visit, just get in touch. And that's something that we could arrange as well. Okay, so thanks ever so much for coming along. Your enthusiasm, see you all, and keep in touch. I'll let you know what I'm doing next. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Fantastic.
Thank you.